The first show values as calculation that I want to talk through is one of the most powerful and also one of the most common, which is the percent of column or percent of row, depending on how you're viewing your data. So in our pivot, for those who have been following along, we're going to go ahead and tweak this view a little bit and pull budget and reviews out. We're going to drag in gross revenue, and here we go. We're going to continue to view by genre. Let's just go into our design tools and add grand totals for rows and columns. So at this point, we're looking at the sum of gross revenue with no additional calculation broken down by genre, which may be exactly what I need. But let's say someone asks, all right, what share of total revenues were driven by comedy films versus documentary films? I could certainly make those calculations by dividing the revenue numbers into the grand total, but that's an extra step and it's manual, and I would love a way to automate that or to skip that manual step. So what I could do here is right-click the values, go into Show Values As, and select the percent of column total calculation. And when I do that, you'll see that the entire column totals up to 100%, and each genre has been translated into a percentage. And this is a really great way to visualize or analyze things like composition or relative share across items or categories. So for instance, what this tells me is that action films as a whole accounted for 36.46% of total gross revenue within my sample. Now it's important to keep in mind that you have to be aware of your pivot table coordinates as you're interpreting these numbers. And what I mean by that is that if we instead had certain filters applied here, now all of a sudden if I'm interpreting this number, I can't say that drama films accounted for 42.1% of revenue as a whole. I'll have to say that in the country of Spain, among color films specifically, drama films accounted for 42.1%. So just a quick word of warning, make sure that you're being vigilant about understanding the context of your pivot table view. So that's percent of column. Now if we were to grab that genre breakout from row labels and move it into column labels, now all of a sudden each genre is on its own column, so the column totals each become 100%, which isn't very useful. And that's where the percent of row total calculation comes in. So I can just right click, show values as percent of row total, and now this row as a whole totals up to 100%, and each genre displays its relative share as a percentage. So another way to visualize this is to take a second field like country and pull country into the row labels, and now we have kind of this matrix or this two-dimensional pivot table view. And right now we're still looking at these values as percent of row. So each individual row here is totaling up to 100%, but scrolling down, the columns do not add up to 100%. So when I right-click any value, show them back as the column total, now my columns add up to 100, but my rows do not. So really the two calculations are doing very, very similar things. The only difference is that you'll use one versus the other depending on exactly how your data is organized or structured. So there you go, percent of column total, percent of row total. Really common, really powerful show values as tools.